right? So this is the reason which is printed. Okay, that is it failed because of some reason, XYZ reason. Okay, now uh, sometimes you would like to match certain values. Suppose you have a expected value and you have the actual value. Where will you get the actual value from? You'll get the actual value from Selenium, from the application. But right now I am just writing over here. And I want to compare this expected value with actual value and fail the test case if both of them are not equal. Then again you can use the assert class and you can write assert dot assert equals. It expects two parameters. The first parameter is the expected value, the actual value, and the second parameter is the expected value. If both of them are equal, then this assertion will pass, it will not fail. But if both of them they differ, then this assertion will fail. Okay, if I run this gmail.java as a TestNg test, right, it will say that total test runs are 2, failures are 0, skips are 0, and if you look at this send mail, it has passed. Okay, it has passed. But if I give, so like I make the W capital over here, if I make the W capital out here, okay, and now if I run this as a TestNg test, you will see that this has failed. Okay, so it will tell you that this was the expected, but I got this thing, so please correct it or something like that. So this represents a failure. Similarly, you have got another type of assertion function, assert dot assert true. Fine. In this you give a condition. The condition should evaluate to true or false. For example, 2 greater than 1. Fine. For example, 2 greater than 1, and you can give some error message. Right? You can give your own customized error message. What does this do? Assert true means that make sure the condition evaluates to true. 2 greater than 1 is true. If this is true, then this assertion will actually pass. Fine, it will not fail. If you run this time it will pass. It will not fail. Everything will go green in sendmail. But if this assertion fails, that means if 2 is not greater than 11, this condition evaluates to false, then you will get an error message and you will actually get the error message over here, some error message customized expected. So you will get this error message in the reports. Now when do we use this kind of assertion? Suppose we need to check the presence of the element. So we give the condition over here, is element present, which evaluates to true or false, and if it is not present, if it evaluates to false, you can give the customized error message out here. Okay, so as I was talking about, we use this when we have some condition, that is whether some link is present or not, or whether some object is present or not on the page. So if you have a condition, you can use this type of assertion. Similarly, there is also something known as assert dot assert false. This is opposite of true. In this case, the condition should evaluate to true and then the test would fail. If the condition evaluates to false, the test would actually pass. Fine. So now what next? Right. Okay. Now in assertions, there is a little issue. That is, suppose I write system.out.println A over here and system.out.println B over here. Now the assertion will fail on this line because this thing is evaluating to false, right? If I run this as a TestNg test, fine, it reports a failure. Okay, A is printed but B is not printed. What happens is that if because of an assertion, right, if the assertion is failing, okay, then the program it actually terminates on that line. The test it actually terminates on that line. Now I don't want that to happen sometimes, because sometimes you would have soft errors that even if the error is coming up, you should be able to report the error, but you should be moving forward. For example, some text is not there on the page or something like that, a very soft error is there. You would want that assertion should report an error, but it should actually move further, right? So how do we achieve that? We can achieve it. That's not a big deal. Okay, we can achieve it. That's not a big deal. Only thing is that you need to understand the concept of listeners in TestNg. So I'll be talking about listeners in TestNg. I will not do that right now. I'll be talking about in some time, maybe today or tomorrow, right? So first of all, I need to tell you more concepts in TestNg. Okay, so this is the thing over here. Please note, we'll be coming back to this point, right? That is, if the assertion fails on this line, the program terminates, and sometimes we would not like the program to terminate. Okay, right? So till now I have told you about the test function, the test annotation, right? And I told you about skipping the test cases. I told you about how to validate something using assertions. So now we'll be talking about various things, such as, I'll just note them down so that we don't forget. We'll be talking about parameterizing the test cases. We'll be talking about various other annotations as well in TestNg. We'll be talking about running in batch. That is, suppose I have got both these Java files. I want to run all the test cases present in both these Java files, right? Then we'll be talking about listener, test listener adapter, right? Only after I tell you how to read, how to run it in batch, I'll be able to talk about listener. That is the issue which I told you right now. I need to make you understand how to run the test in batch to resolve this issue. That is, the test starts, the test stops. Fine. And then we'll study about ant, build and compile tool. This helps you to kind of run the project through command prompt, or you can also make an exe file of your project and you can execute it, right? So let's start with this part. Fine, let's start with parameterizing the test cases. For example, I had a simple test. I'll create a very simple test called as create user. Fine, I'm creating a user in my website. For example, this is the test case, public void create user. Just taking a hypothetical example, right? And what all data you need to create, you need to actually create the user. We need his name, we need his email ID, we need his phone number, we need the city in which he lives. So this is four sets of like four information. This is all the information which we need to create a user, and inside this function we will have the Selenium code which will be creating the user, right? Now suppose I want to run this test case 5 times and create 5 different users. How do I do that? Will I be right clicking on the test and running it again and again as a TestNg test? No, we don't do it like that. We parameterize the test case. There is another annotation known as @data provider. Okay, you can write in this public, you have to write like this. It returns you an object array, import it. Right now, what is this object? Many people, they are little confused about this. First I'll explain you. Hold on, I'll just write return null for time being in it so that the error goes away. Right now I'll just create a new file under test under the source folder, and I'll name it object class. Object is an inbuilt class in Java, just like you have got string class, array list, hash tables, which we studied earlier. Object is an inbuilt class. Now suppose I make an array in Java. I write over here string s equals to new string, and I keep 5 elements inside it. So what happens is that this string array can hold strings, right? But what if I want to store numbers in it? Can I write over here some number? No, it will give you an error because this is a string array. I cannot store numbers in it. If I have to store a number, I'll have to store it as a string. I'll have to write like this, right? But in order to make an array which can hold numbers as well as integers as well as boolean and all everything, you can use the object class. You can write over here object array o equals to new object. Now in this kind of array, right, you can store anything. For example, in O0 I can store a string. In O1 I can store a number. In O2 I can store a boolean value. Different types of data types can come in the object array. In O3 I can store a double or a decimal number. Fine. O4 can hold a character as well. So in object array you can have different types of data. Fine. Just telling you for your information, generally we just keep the strings in the object array. Okay. But in your coming back to the create user class, you have the data provider here. This data provider is a two-dimensional object array. Fine. What do you mean by two-dimensional object array? In the memory, it will be looking something like this. It will have rows and columns. Okay. And it will have columns like these. Okay. Now if I want to execute the test 4 times, then I will have 4 rows. Number of rows should be equal to number of times you want to execute the test. Okay, number of rows should be equal to number of times you want to execute the test, and number of columns should be equal to number of test parameters: username, password, email, phone, city, and all everything. Okay, so suppose I make a two-dimensional object array over here. I write over here object array called data equals to new object array with 2 rows and 4 columns. So number of columns should be equal to same as number of test parameters here, 4 parameters, and number of rows 2 is it's equal to number of times you want to run the test. So I'll fill up the data in this array. In row 1 I'll fill up the data. I'll write over here data 0 0 is equal to, say, sheesh, 0th row, 1 row, 2 row, 3 row, email, phone, city, right? Similarly, I can fill in the second row. Row 2, 1, 2, 3, and say Tom some number, right? So these are records of 2 users which you want to create in this test function. Fine, right? And in the end, this should be one. First row, second row should be 1, right? And in the end you write over here return data. So this is my row 1, this is my row 2, right? I have just got 2 rows. That means I want to execute the test 2 times, and 4 sets of data. That means I've got 4 parameters, right? Later on we'll read all this from the Excel file. Okay, and in this test function you have to write like this, that the data provider for this test is get data function. So you link the data provider with the test case. You have to link it like this. For this test, this is the data provider. Fine. And the most important thing which many people they miss out at times is that number of input parameters in the test should be same as total number of columns. That is, I need to write like this. The first parameter would be first column string name, comma string email, comma string phone, comma string city. Okay, number of input parameters in this test should be same as or should be equal to number of parameters or number of columns equals to 4. Even if you skip any one of them, it will give you an error. Okay, now if I run this create, that's all, nothing more. Now TestNg will automatically read. TestNg will first go into the data provider. It will see that there are 2 rows, 4 columns. Fine, it will read the data, everything. It will go into the test function. It will see that the data for this test is coming from this function, and because this function is returning you 2 rows, it will automatically call this test function 2 times, pass it different sets of data. If you run this as a TestNg test, you will see that this test is executing 2 times, right? 2 times with different sets of data. Okay, now if by mistake you forget one set over here, then you will get an error. Even if you forget one of the input parameters, you will get an error, configuration failure. Okay, the data provider is trying to pass 4 parameters, but the method takes 3. So you'll get an error like this. So better you provide number of parameters equal to number of columns in the 2-dimensional object array, right? But there's a problem over here. Sometimes the pages we test practically in the real-time application, they've got a lot of data. Like on a single field, suppose there are 50 checked input boxes in which you need to enter some data, 50. Will you be giving 50 parameters over here? it will be very difficult thing to maintain over a period of time. Suppose if some field it gets tomorrow the developer changes the page and instead of 50 they are 45. Will you remove all these things from the code? Then you'll have to change the code. So we should always make the code which you should be making it smart enough so that if the developer changes something on the website, it should have a minimum impact on the code. Not tomorrow if email gets removed, I will have to remove email from here, right? So it's a problem. Okay, so you have the solution for that. I will be giving you the solution when we go to the framework, actual framework. When you automate a website, you will actually see that. Okay, so let's do one thing.